Begin the current Daf, Mesech the Sukkah Daf Lamed Hey. We begin on the top line of the Amud, where we begin explaining the halacha of our previous Mishnah, which was discussing the fourth of the Daled Minim of that of Esrog regarding its specific parameters of halacha. Shiur's corresponds to Bekazik and Chezkel, Tarantim Daf Achaim. Pershim is joining us for today's Daf. Should be a discussion with Tinnik Ben Yehudis. Some of these we're going to discuss in today's Daf are the identity of the Esrog. How do we know? Like we said, the Pesukim don't say anywhere Aravis, Hadassim, Lulavim. We have to translate what the words mean. How do we know it means the esrog that we use? Can Meiser Sheni be used for mitzvahs? That gets into a discussion regarding is Meiser Sheni something that we own or that we don't own? Using Truma and Demai for an esrog? Which blemishes disqualify an esrog? Which obviously we're very busy with that throughout our esrog buying, when it's going to come up soon. Some of the key terms and concepts are challah, which is one of the 24 kahana gifts that are taken out from the dough, which is given to the kohen. Hechsher tumah is when that of a food item comes in contact with water or one of the 7 types of liquids, it becomes susceptible to tumah. And chaitim is the nose, which in our context refers to that of the esrog, which the esrog, we know the chaitim, which is when it starts slanting towards the end, that is the most severe area of the esrog because that's the most visible, and therefore it has the most halachic restrictions. As we know also when people look for an esrog, you look at the chaitim to see, do you see a pintala or not? That's going to be also mentioned in today's daf. So we begin the current daf. Tarabban learn the brisa, top line of the Amud, daf lamed hey, pre-eitz hadar. It says in the Torah, the fruit of the beautiful tree. So there's 4 interpretations in the Gemara how we know this refers to the esrog. So it's a tree, shetam eitzai upir yeshava, that the taste of its tree and of its fruit are the same. And that's why it says pre-eitz, that the eitz is like the pre, that they have the same taste. That's going to tell you it's the esrog. The esrog has the same taste, as somewhat of a taste, the bark as the fruit itself. So that's interpretation number 1. So the Gemara, however, asks on this interpretation. Maybe it refers to peppercorns, because the Tanya in the Brisa, Meir said the following teaching. He says, "B'mash b'shenema," from the fact that the pasuk says in Vayikra, when it talks about the halachas of orla, which is that a fruit tree in its first 3 years are forbidden to be eaten, it says in the pasuk, "Netatem kol eitz." So you're going to plant all trees, and it says at the end of the pasuk over there, "Lo ya'achil," it shouldn't be eaten in its first 3 years. So obviously, says the Gemara, "Eni yedeshu eitz machil." I don't know that it's a fruit tree. Of course it is. It's saying don't eat its fruits of the tree. So matamalim, why does the pasuk have to tell me eitz machil, a fruit tree? You already are telling me about the fruits of the tree. Rather, it's coming to tell you. When it says eitz machel, it's eitz shetam eitz upir yeshav. It's telling you that the eitz is the machel. It's because it's a tree that the taste of the wood and of the fruit are the same. That's coming to tell you what is it including for the laws of arla. Zeh pilpulin, that refers to peppercorns. Lamet to teach you 2 things. First of all, shah pilpulin chayim ba'arla, that peppercorns are obligated in the laws of arla. That it means in the first 3 years the peppercorns are forbidden. Which Rashi says, why do you need a special limud to tell me peppercorns that it's going to have the halachas of arla more than any other fruit tree? So Rashi says that you shouldn't say that it's actually a type of a yerek, of a plant, of a vegetable. Why would you think it's a vegetable when it grows on a tree? It's because it's a very low down tree, which is not so high, like a bush, and therefore you would have thought it's like a vegetable. Taisus disagrees, says, what do you mean? That's not the criterion. We have many trees that are very low down. Rather, Taisus says that since we find elsewhere, like when someone chews peppercorns in Yom Kippur, he's potter because it's dry, so it's not like really like considered like an edible thing. So you would think since ultimately it's going to dry up, even when it's moist, it'd be potter, there wouldn't be obligated in the laws of arla. Therefore, you needed to tell me the chiddush of that pilpul and archayev ba'arla. Again, that's reasoning number 1. And also, the second thing the Torah is teaching us, that Eretz is not lacking anything, even peppercorns. Like it says the pasuk in the Varm, there's not going to be anything lacking in the land of Eretz Yisrael. And that's what you're learning out from eitz machel, that even peppercorns are included, even that is considered as a machel, that you have the laws of arla and that Eretz Yisrael has. But one thing is that you see that peppercorns are also considered eitz upir tam shava, that the fruit and the tree have the same taste. So how do you know that it's referring to the esrog when the peppercorns have the same criterion of eitz upir tam shava? Which actually Taisa asked that you could also say that by that pasuk by arla is referring to esrog. He says no, that wouldn't be a chiddush, and also other things. But al kapanim, how do you know over here that pre-eitz hadar refers to that of esrog and not peppercorns? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Hasam over there, meaning in our context, a Pri Yitzadar, Mishum D'Li'efshar, it's not possible to take with your lulav and your dasman and your ravas peppercorns. Because heichanavid, what should you do? If you're going to say ninkut chada to take one kernel, one peppercorn, it's not recognizable because it's so small, holding that small little peppercorn. And ninkut trei or tlasa, and if you think to say take 2 or 3 peppercorns, the problem is priyam rachman. The Torah says in the singular the fruit. Not 2 or 3 different fruits. Therefore, it's not possible, and therefore they cannot be the interpretation. You're right. It is pre that eats and that has the same taste, but it wouldn't be feasible. That's interpretation number 1. Now the Gemara gives 3 more interpretations. I'm translating the word hadar, what tells me that it's going to be the esrog. Rabbi Shloimy says a second interpretation. He says, Al tikri hadar, don't read it beautiful, ila hadir, rather the corral. Meaning we're talking about the fruit of a tree, that its tree is similar to a corral of sheep. What does that mean? Madir is just like this corral, which is where you keep the pen, where you keep the animals in. You have big animals, small animals, tamim, balimumin, unblemished and blemished animals. Hachanami. Here also by the esrog tree, there's large esrogim, small esrogim, tamimim, unblemished, balimumin, blemished. So the Gemara says, I understand. What do you mean? You think other trees? You think apple tree, they're all the same? You don't think you have big ones and small ones and ones that have verm and those that don't have? What does that mean? So rather says the Gemara, and this is what we're saying. When the small ones are already coming, the big ones are still there. In other words, when we're saying that there are big ones and small ones, we don't mean from the same year. We mean the big ones because they're from last year, and the small ones meaning are from this year. Because what's unique about the esrog tree is that it stays on the tree for 2-3 years. So when the new ones are now ripening, you still have the big ones, meaning from last year, that are still around. That's what hadir is, like a corral, that just like you have the old animals from last year, so too you have the old esrogim from the previous year. That's how you know that pre-it's hadir refers to the esrog. Rabbi Vos Amar, he says a third interpretation that's similar, but it just comes from a different etymological derivation. It's just a different word. He says, I'll take you hadir, don't read it beautiful, ela hadar, that dwells, like dira. Davar shadar bilon mishal nashon. We're talking about something that dwells on the tree from year to year, which Rashi says it's really the same as Rabbi. It's just their differential is regarding the understanding of what the word is. One is saying it's a terminology of dir, of that of a corral, and one's saying a lashon of dira, that of a dwelling, but they both mean the same thing. It's that which stays from year to year. Fourth interpretation, Ben Nazar, he says, Al tikri hadar, don't read it beautiful, eli idur. What's idur? Shekem b'lashon Yavani, because in the Greek language, karin lamayim idur, they call water idur. So why would pre-eitz idur be referring to the esrog? Because ve'ezeh shagadol kamayim, what's the type of fruit that grows on all types of water? Meaning, even on drawn water, esrog grows in all types of watering. Havaim is the esrog that refers to the esrog, and therefore, since it grows from many sources of water, therefore that's what idur, which is from hadar, refers to. Those are the 4 interpretations how we know pre-eitz hadar refers to that of the esrog. Now we said in the Mishnah that a stolen esrog is possible because it's not lachem. We said if it's dried out esrog is possible because it's not hadar. And then we said shalash era. The shalinidach is possible if it's from a avodah zarah tree, or it's from a city that has to get burnt down to the ground because most of the inhabitants did avodah zarah. The esrogim from that is considered possible. Says Gemara, my time, what's the reason? But as we said by previous of the dal minim, keeping the l'sreifa koy, since it's going to be burned, kesusi mechta shereha. So we already consider it as a pulverized, because it's standing to have that status of not being around. And the problem is that esrog has a minimum size, as we said in our Mishnah, and therefore it's not going to be valid. The next halacha is a little bit more complex. The Mishnah said shal arla pasla, and that's what we said. Each one of the dalminim has its own unique halachas, and this is unique to that of the esrog, which is a fruit. So if it's arla, which is the fruits of a tree in the first 3 years that you planted it, its fruits are arla. They're forbidden to have hana, to eat it. So we said that if you use an esrog of arla, it's possible. Says my time, what's the reason? What's the problem with the arla esrog? So pligi by the b'chi baravin, but it's a machlokes amaram. Charama one says because you can't eat it, and the Torah says it has to be v'lakachtem lochem. You have to take it for you, which means it has to be fit to be for you, which is, as Rashi's words are, b'chol darche hanaasai, in all types of forms of pleasure. And since you can't eat it, so it's not considered lochem, and therefore it doesn't qualify for the category of the type of esrog you need to use. The other one says a different interpretation. It's Lefisha Ein Badin Mammon, because it doesn't have any monetary value, even of a pruta, because arla is not only forbidden to be eaten, you're not allowed to have any pleasure from it. So therefore, that's why it's not lechem, because you can't even use it, as no monetary value for you, so it doesn't qualify for lekachtam lechem. So the Gemara says, Kasal Gadaite, the Gemara entertained to say, the manda b'yeheter achilam, the one that requires that you have to have a permission to eat it. Meaning, but if you had the permissibility of eating it, for example, what? Like Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Meiser Sheni is not really, as we'll see shortly, according to some, for sure, it's not considered your money. It's Hashem's money. Hashem says, here's the second tithe, I let you eat it, in Yerushalayim. But it doesn't have monetary value, but you could eat it. Lo b'yadin din mammon. That opinion would hold that you don't have to have any monetary value. So even though, according to a mayor and Kedushin Abnun Beis and Beis that holds Meiser Sheni is Hashem's money and it's not your money, and you can't even use it, let's say, if you want to take Meiser Sheni produce and say to a woman, here, get engaged to me for this, this apple is worth a pruta for sure. No, you wouldn't be able to make a because it's not your money. Still, it would be valid to fulfill your obligation because as a heter achila, you can use it. And that's what that mandama says, arla is not good because no heter achila. Okay, fine, but if it has heter achila, even though it doesn't have any monetary value, that would be good. And also the other way around, we thought. The one who holds that it has to have a monetary value, he doesn't have to have that you should be able to eat it. For example, an esrog of tevel. Untithed produce, you're not allowed to eat, but you're allowed to have a no. So that's what we thought to say. We thought to say that either one of these manda only hold uniquely what they're saying, either heter achila or heter mammon. The problem is, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah another case, and this is where it gets a little bit more complex. We learned shel truma temeya. If you take truma, right? Truma is any type of produce that you have. You take off 1/50th approximately. You give it to the kohen. Now the kohen usually eats the truma. But what happens if the truma becomes tamei? What do you do with it then? You can't eat it. No one's allowed to eat truma that's tamei. A kohen can't eat it because it's tamei. There's a chiyuv of misa. So what happens if you have an esrog that's truma that became tamei? So on that the Mishnah says pasul. It's invalid. You can't use it as an esrog. So why? So the Gemara explains. Bishlim elamandama, we understand according to the one who says that if you don't have the permission to eat it, that's not considered lechem. Okay, shopper, that makes sense. Of course you can't use a truma temeya because no one could eat it. So it won't qualify for lechem. Elamandam, according to one who says din mammon. The reason why you cannot use the esrog of arla is because it has no monetary value. It's isra no. But you don't need to be able to eat it. And it's because it has monetary value, it's considered lechem. So wait a second, amai. Why can't you take an estrog of truma that became tamei? What do you mean? Truma? What do you do with truma that became tamei? What do you actually do with it if no one could eat it? So the Gemara tells us in Shabbos of Chavhei Beis that it says, when you're giving the truma to the kohen, the pasuk says, titen loy, give it to him, meaning for him, and the drasha is, v'loy le'uroi, not that he should be using it for his fire as fuel, which excludes truma temeya. That's not the type of truma you should give it to the kohen. But the inference is that when he has truma temeya, he can use it to fuel his fire because no one could eat it. But okay, firewood, and he'll take all the truma temeya and burn it. So you see that it has monetary value because he could use it for fueling his fire. So that if you hold the qualification is because of din mammon, so then why does our Mishnah say truma temeya is going to be possible that you can't use it as an esrog? Why you have din mammon? Who cares that you can't eat it? So Ella, rather, because of this question, the Gemara actually says that different interpretation than we said up until now. The truth is, beheter achilu, with the permission of eating, kulem alay pligi de be'inan. You're right. No one disagrees that even if it has a monetary value, it's not going to be valid if you can't eat it, because since it's not fit for all types of pleasure, which is definitely that of eating, it's not considered lechem. And if you can't eat something, it won't be qualified as l'kach lechem to be able to use as an esrog. Ki pligi, the machlekes amaram was bedin mammon. Does it in addition need to have a monetary value? Marsava, one of these amaram, it doesn't say who's who, but he held heter achila be'inan, that you have to have the ability to eat it, din mammon loy be'inan, but you don't have to have monetary value. And rather, it's enough if it's permitted to be eaten, like Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim, according to Reb Meir, it's going to be kosher. So therefore, as Rashi points out, our Mishnah that says that Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim is going to be kosher, it's even like Reb Meir who says Ma'aser Sheni is Hashem's money, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't have to be my money, as long as I can eat it, it's considered as lochem. Whereas that other man the Amar, Mar Savar, Din Maman Nami Be'ina. No, you also need to have halacha of a monetary value. So actually, according to Reb Meir, Meiser Sheni of Esrig would be possible because it's not your money. So when our Mishnah says kosher, it's specifically going like the Rabbanan that they say that Meiser Sheni is a regular person's money, and you could use it to engage and betroth a woman. And therefore, that's why it's specifically that machlekes regarding Arla that they said, what's the reason why it's invalid? Is because it doesn't have a heter achilo or because it doesn't have a din mammon? But again, everyone's going to agree, but Truma Tamei, it's going to be possible because everyone agrees you have to have a heter achilo. The question is, do you also have to have a din mammon? So the Gemara says, my benai, what's the difference between these two interpretations? Is Ziki benayu, Meiser Sheni, Yerushalayim, the difference between them is Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim, Ali b'Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir, who holds that Meiser Sheni is Mammon Gavaya. And therefore, again, it has no din mammon because it doesn't belong to him, but it has a heter achila. As the Gemara explains, according to the one that says that the problem is if you don't have a permission to eat it, well, hariyish behet achila. You could eat it the Meiser Sheni Yerushalayim. So therefore it's going to be valid to be used according to a mayor as estrig in Yerushalayim. According to the one that says that it doesn't have a monetary value, that is the disqualification of an esrig. Well, Meiser Sheni Mam Gabayu, Meiser Sheni is Hashem's money. It's not considered as lochem, and therefore, according to that man the Amar, it would be invalid according to a mayor to use the esrig of Meiser Sheni as your esrig on Sukkot. Now, we didn't say when we said the machlekes who was which man the Amar. We had two man the Amrim, who Reb Chibar Avin and Rabasi, and one said that the problem is because it doesn't have din mammon, and one says because it doesn't have heter achila. Says the Gemara, "Testaim de Rabasi the Amal Afisha in ba din mammon." Let's prove that Rabasi was the one who said that the disqualification is because it doesn't have a monetary value, and therefore, even if you have a permission of eating it, you still need to have that has monetary value, and hence, according to a mayor, a Meiser Sheni Esther would be possible because although you could eat the Meiser Sheni, it's not considered your money. You cannot give it to a woman to engage her. How can we prove this? Because Amr Rabasi said, Esther shal Meiser Sheni, Esther Meiser Sheni l'divrei meir, and he says clearly, Ein odem yotzei b'yedei chavasa b'yamtiv. You cannot fulfill your obligation of a sukkah of Esther on sukkahs, which that proves the idea. Because according to the other man, the Amma, you would be able to, according to Meir, because you could eat it, you just don't have monetary value. Whereas the Chachamim, they hold you could fulfill your obligation because they don't hold Meiser Sheni as Mammon Gabay, they hold it as Mammon Hedjid. But Tistayim, we proved that Ravasi is the one that holds that it's not going to be valid to be used on Sukkahs for the Esther. Now, Gufa, going back to this teaching, the Gemara actually qualifies three different areas of halacha that have this criterion of Meir regarding Meiser Sheni being Mammon Gavaya as a problem. Gufa Amar Basi says, Esrik Shal Meiser Sheni. Again, you have a Meiser Sheni Esrik, you have an Esrik orchard, you got to take off tithes, you give 1/10 to the Levi, and you have a second tenth, which you have all Yisra'im, which you have to take up to Yerushalayim. Now, you have so many Yisra'im, can you use that Esrik Meiser Sheni? You want to sell the rest, and you have your Meiser Sheni Esrik, can you use it? So Rabbi says, according to Meir, holds out it's Hashem's money. You're not going to fulfill your obligation on Yom Tov because it's not lachem. Although you could eat it, again, Rabasi held that it has to have din mammon too. We said, a person could fulfill his obligation, and we mentioned this before. Now, the Gemara adds on two more areas of halacha, not just regarding Esther on Sukkot, but two more areas where you have a mayor of Meiser Sheni, who he holds Meiser Sheni is Mammon Gavaya Hashem's money, not like the Chacham holds only a regular person's money. Matzah shel Meiser Sheni. Regarding the matzah of Meiser Sheni. So let's say you had wheat, and you went and you had your second tithe, you bring up to Yerushalayim, you go up Oyla the Regel, and you have your Meiser Sheni. You can use that Meiser Sheni for the matzahs that you can have on by the Seder night. So different Meir, he says, a person cannot fulfill his obligation of matzah on the Seder night with the matzahs of Meiser Sheni. Which Gemara later is going to ask, what? Does it say in the way matzhaschem, that has to be your matzah? I mean, the problem would be it's not yours. Does it say in the way that? But the Chachamim, who they hold Meiser Sheni is your money, a person can fulfill his obligation on Pesach. A third area of halacha is Isa shel Meiser Sheni, a dough of Meiser Sheni. The different Meir, according to a Meir, P'tur min hachala. It's exempt from challah. You know why? Because it says Arisa Seichem, your dough. And again, it's not your dough, it's Hashem's dough. Now, although you're allowed to eat it, but since it doesn't have any monetary value, it's not considered yours. Again, the Chacham, who they hold that Meiser Sheni is your money, it's Mammon Hedjid, Chayev B'chad, it's going to be obligated in challah. Now, the Gemara wonders and says, wait a second. Masker Rav Papa asks, he says, Bishlam Isa, I understand the case of the dough that you're going to be exempt from challah according to Meir, because it says in the Pasuk Midbar, when it talks about the obligation of challah, it says Reishis Arisa Seichem, the first of your doughs has to be your dough, and it's not your dough, it's Hashem's dough. Okay, Esrog Nami, I know, because Ksiv Lachem, it says Lokachtem Lachem, which means Mishal Lachem has to be yours. So okay, I get it why Ma'aser Sheni Esrog is going to be invalid. Matzah, but for the matzahs on the Seder night, Miksev Matzaschem, does it anywhere it has to be your matzahs? When the item comes for the Seder night, and he says, I want to be koina l'shem mitzvah's matzah, that has to be his matzah? Says the Gemara, yeah. You know why? Because Amar Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it says, Asya lechem lechem. We have a Gzeir Shava of the word lechem. Ksevach, it says over in Devar, by the matzah, it says, lechem, only the poor man's bread, the bread of affliction. Ksevach, it says over there in the context of, as we continue on Beis, the obligation of challah. It says, when you're going to eat from the bread of the land. So by both of them, it says the word lechem. Now, malal and just like over there by challah, it has to be yours and not of meiser, as we mentioned before, because it says arisai seichem. So avkan, when we're having the gzeir shava of lechem, it's also mishalachem mishal meiser, has to be from yours and not from meiser. So therefore, that's why these three areas halacha are going to be invalid according to Ravasi's interpretation of a mayor. Says Gemara, let's say a brisa supports that of Ravasi, because the brisa says Isa shel meiser sheni, the dough of meiser sheni, b'truma nachala, the remeir. They say no chayevas b'chala, it's mechayev b'chala, which is exactly like Ravasi just said, that the dough of meiser sheni is exempt from chala according to Meir, because again, it's meiser sheni mamu gavai, it's not arisa seichem. Says, what does that mean? Let's say we should support him. This is exactly, of course it's supporting him. It's exactly what he just said. Ella rather says, no, I know in the area of challah it's supporting, which is one of the three halachas, he said. But what we meant to say was, let us say, midaha pligi, given the fact that Rami and the Chacham disagree regarding the halacha of challah, B'hanami pligi, they're also disagreeing. In other words, let's say we support him in all three areas. From the fact that by challah, they're disagreeing. Let's say by Esrog and Matzah they're also disagreeing because they're all the same reasoning. Because there it says lochem, and Matzah we learn that from Challah, and so just like it says Arisa Seichem, and they're disagreeing. So too these. Maybe no. Maybe Shani Isa. Maybe dough regarding the chiv of Challah is different. Maybe only over there Meir says you're going to be part of because there's an extra miyut. Why? Because it says the word your dough twice. But maybe when it says only one miyut, we actually would not exclude the meiser sheni according to Meir. And therefore, since it's permitted to eat it, even though it doesn't have a monetary value, maybe it would be considered as lachem in contrast to the other two. So therefore, that's why we said that in lemim sayele. Let's say, because not definitively, because you could say that the case of challah would be different, even though it wonders, we actually darshan other things from Arisa Seichem, but Al Kapam it says 2 times Arisa Seichem. Okay, that means it really has to be yours. Not just that you could eat it, but you have to actually have a din mammon, and which again, Ma'aser Sheni, you have no din mammon. It's not your considered of things. That's what lemim, because not necessarily, maybe dough would be different regarding the chiv of challah, but maybe it would be the same, and that's why it says lemim. We continue with the halacha, the Mishnah that said that shal truma temeya, if let's say we just spoke about truma tahira, and we mentioned in passing truma temeya, we said that puzzle it's going to be psula. Now, what's the problem with truma that became tameh? Again, truma is the portion that you give to the kohen, and it became tameh. We said you can't use that esek. So we mentioned this already before, which we said everyone agrees to, and that's why we actually amended our interpretation of the machlekes that we have in the Mishnah regarding Erla. It's less beheter achila, is because there's no permission of eating it, which again everyone agrees. We said even the one that holds that ein la din mammon, and that's why Erla is invalid, also agrees they have to be able to eat it. And truma that became tummy, no one could eat it, so it's not going to be considered ulakachtem lochem, because it's not considered shalachem, because you can't even eat it, so therefore you can't use an esrog of truma that became tummy. Now, the next halacha of the Mishnah says, but v'shal truma tahira. Let's say you give it to the kohen. The kohen lives next door to the guy who has the esrog orchard, and the guy is saying, look, I have to give trumas and maises. He gives him 1/50th, take it for your family, here's all these esrogim for truma. So it says the Mishnah, lo yito. You shouldn't use such an esrog for your mitzvah on Sukkot. Why? Says the Gemara, pligi by Rabban v'Rabasi, it's a machlekes Rabban and Rabasi. Chanama one says, because you're going to make the esrog susceptible to tumah. As the Mishnah teaches later on the Bezim and Aleph, what they used to do, which still some people do similar, the woman would take from her son and from her husband, she would put the lulav back into the water on Shabbos, where they would put that bundle into water so that it doesn't dry out. The problem is, now when it's going to touch the esrog from the wet lulav, it's going to make it susceptible to tumah. Because it says in the Yikr Yudal, when water touches the food item, it becomes susceptible to tumah. So what's the problem? You're not allowed to cause tumah to truma. Because the pasuk in Mamid B'Yilches, Mishmeres Truma Maisai. You have to safeguard my truma, which is you have to make sure that it doesn't become tummy. So we're not going to let you use the esrog of truma because the wife is going to take it and put the bundle in the fridge with the water in the towel, and then it's going to be wet, and it's going to touch the esrog. It's going to make the esrog truma susceptible to tumah, and that we're not supposed to cause. So that's one interpretation why we don't let you use initially the esrog of truma as your esrog. The other one says a different interpretation. This is mnei mafsida. What happens is you look at an esrog halfway through Sukkot, which some Sefer famously said that's the hiddur of the mitzvah, but you don't want anyone to use don't hold it too tight, the esrog, because it makes flecken, it makes spots, it ruins it. So the outer peel is going to become disgusted because everyone's touching you go to fruit stores, they don't want you just touching everything. Don't touch if you're not going to buy. So the esrog, everyone's touching. So the problem is you're not allowed to ruin truma. Truma has to be eaten. And if you're going to use it as the esrog, it's going to ruin the outer peel. So that's again another reason why we don't want you to use the truma esrog for your esrog on Sukkot time, because you're going to be touching, and all the kids are going to say, I want a shakal tate, I want a shakal, and it's going to ruin the outer peel, and you're not allowed to do that to truma. Says the Yomai, but now what's in between them? Okay, what's the difference? They're both reasons why. What's the difference? Says the difference is kukun shekara l'shem. Let's say you designated it to be truma. Chutz mikli plasa chitzayna. You mean you could separate truma however you want to, and you said that let the fruit besides the outer peel be truma. So according to the one that says that the problem is because you're making it susceptible to se'ikah, there's still the concern because the whole thing will be when the outer peel gets wet, it's the whole fruit that's considered susceptible. Whereas but according to the one that says the problem is because there's ruining truma, there's no problem with ruining truma because the outer peel is not truma. So that would be a difference between them regarding this halacha of using a truma esrog as your esrog on sukkahs. Now, that was the first part of this halacha, that initially one should not use it on sukkahs. But the Mishnah then continues and said, Vim but if you did use the truma tahira esrog, sure, it's going to be valid. So the Gemara explains, this is dependent on our discussion on Amud Aleph. Lamandam, according to the one that said regarding the arla esrog, that the reason why it was a problematic esrog was because you can't eat it. This truma esrog, it could be eaten by a kain. Now, additionally, a Yisrael could also fulfill his obligation if he buys it from a kain, because he could feed his grandson. If his daughter, that's a Israelis, get married to a kain, his grandson is a kain. And therefore, it's considered that he has a heter achila because he could feed it to his grandson. Now, Rashi points out, obviously you cannot redeem truma, that a Yisrael should be able to eat it. And whoever says it is a wicked person. But it's considered having heter achila because he could feed it to the einikel, and there it's considered heter achila. Doesn't mean that you have to be able to eat it. Whereas laman dam lafisha im badin mam, and also just in a different interpretation, the one that says that the problem with Orla, let's say, was that it doesn't have a monetary value. Hayesh badin mammon. It does have monetary value because a kohen could engage a betrothed woman with truma that's tahira, and a Yisrael also, if he gives it to the kohen, he could also be mekadosh a woman, and therefore he could sell it to the kohen, and the money is his. So therefore, again, it's considered that it has a monetary value and as a achila. So of course, after the fact, if you use truma tahira as a esrog, you can fulfill your obligation. It's just initially not, again, either because you're shiur, because you can make it susceptible to tumah, or because you're going to be ruining the outer peel. You're not supposed to ruin that of truma. Now, the next halacha of the Mishnah was b'shal demai. Again, demai is when you purchase produce from the Amma Aretz. Now, generally, when you buy pears from them, we are in a doubt. Maybe he didn't take maisus. Although really most Amaratzim ignorant people, they would take off maisus. But the Chacham or Masakin, since we're not sure, you have to take off maestris from the produce. Now, let's say you didn't. You have this untithed produce of the Amma Aretz. You don't know if he took off. You generally assume, yeah, but in halacha we require you to separate maestris. You have this demai produce. We had a machlekes in the Mishnah, Bisham and Basil. Bisham says pasul. Basil says kosher to use as an esrog. So says the Gemara, my time in the Beis Hill, what's the reason in the Beis Hill that they say that you yaitza, what do you mean, but you're not allowed to eat it? I thought we said everyone agrees it has to have a heter achila. You're not allowed to eat demai, you have to separate maestros. So how can you use it as your esrog? How is it considered lechem? Says the Gemara, the following svar, which is mentioned many times in Shas, since if a person wanted to, he could take all his assets, all his properties, and be mafkrit, and declare ownerless. Then he'd be considered a pauper, and v'chazilei, and then it would be fit for him. And the reason for it is, like Rashi points out, as we mentioned before, most ignorant people, they do take off maasros. Really, the halach of demai is really just a stringency, that they considered it rabbinically as a doubt if it's considered tevel as untithed. But regarding paupers and travelers, they didn't make that rabbinic injunction, and therefore it's actually permitted for aniyim. So even now it would be considered as lachem, because if you made everything hefker, and you'd be an ani, and you'd be able to use it, so then it would be lachem. So now it's also lachem, because migu you could be mafker all your nechasim. Which Trace really points out you don't really even have to do this, because you could say very simply, since there's a het achila to an ani, just like Yisrael could fulfill with truma, because he could give it to a kohen, that's considered het achila for his grandson. So also, Trace says the same thing would be because you can give it to an ani. It's just l'rav chid milsa. It's just saying another chiddush. But the truth is, you don't even have to be able to make it hefker, and that you have no money, and that you could use it as an ani, because you could give it to some other ani. But upon him, it's considered lachem because you could be mafker and you'll be an ani. Did not like we learned this halacha in the Mishnah Masechet is demai. The Mishnah tells us machilan esanim demai. You could feed paupers demai, meaning without taking off maestros, and vasachsanya, which are the soldiers of the king, which their sustenance is incumbent upon the people who live there in the country, is also you could feed them demai. Now, ubishamai, they hold no, ani loy achalei demai. The reason why they say that the esrog of demai is possible is because it does not have a heter achila. Because ani cannot eat demai. It's not like we learned over there in the Mishnah in demai that says machil hanim demai. You could feed paupers demai, besachsonoi demai, which is going like Beis Hill. He says, Talmud on the Bryce of Bishamim, they say, no, you cannot feed a pauper and travelers demai. Basilim, they say, no, you could feed paupers demai, you could feed achsam demai, which Tosis points out, what do we need Rav Huna for to tell us Bishamai? It's because in case you ever see a Bryce that says you cannot, it's actually Beishamai who holds that you cannot feed paupers achsam demai. Next case in the Mishnah was Shamaisa Sheni Shebe Yerushalayim. So again, when a person has produce, he separates Truma 1/50th to the kohen, he takes another 10th and gives it to Levi, and the second tithe, which is called the Meiser Sheni, he takes up to Yerushalayim and he eats it over there. That's an obligation. So we said in the Mishnah that the Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim, you should not take such an esrog as your esrog in Yerushalayim. So what's the reason? So the Gemara explains. Lamandam, according to the one who said, and this is a little bit of a cheshbon, going back to the case of Truma Tahira. We said initially one shouldn't use Truma, that's Tahar, as your esrog. And we had two different reasons. Either because you're being machshirit for Tuma, when it's going to get wet, or because mafsid, you're going to ruin the outer peel. So the Gemara explains. According to the one that says that the reason why you shouldn't use Truma Tahir is because you're going to make it susceptible to Tuma. So heroes, Hari Machshira. If you can use the esrog of Meiser Sheni, the wife is going to put the lulav in the fridge with the towel, wrap it up, and then it's going to go and get wet onto the esrog. And Meiser Sheni also needs to be protected from becoming tamei because it's called kodesh, as the pasuk says in Mikra Zayin, well, Chamaisa Arts, etc. It says that it's called kodesh, and therefore it has the obligation of protecting it. And you now make it susceptible to tumah, which you're going to have when you can make it wet. So that's interpretation number one, why you can't use Meiser Sheni of Yerushalayim. L'madam nisham avsida. According to the one that said the problem with using Truma Tahir is because you're going to ruin the outer peel, you're going to be ruining the outer peel by touching it, the whole sukkahs. And Meiser Sheni also is only supposed to be used for eating purposes, not for anything else. And therefore, by ruining it, that would be a disqualification of that. And again, those two reasons that we said for Truma Tahir why you shouldn't use it is the same two reasons why you shouldn't use Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. But then the Mishnah said, as we said by Truma Tahira, but if he did take such an esrog, share it's going to be kosher. Hirosh Gemara explains. Lamandam, according to the one that says by Arla, that the reason why it was invalid is because there's no permission of eating it. But again, if you would be able to eat it, it would be valid, even if it doesn't have a monetary value. So here by Meiser Sheni, well, there's a heter achila. Of course, Meiser Sheni, the whole purpose is taking up to Yerushalayim to eat it. Also, therefore, the mission that says that it's kosher is actually going like Divrei Hakol, like everybody. Meaning, even according to Rabbi Meir, who says Ma'aser Sheni is Hashem's money, still you could say the halacha of our Mishnah is like him, because over here you don't need a din mammon. As long as you could eat it, it's considered lachem, and therefore it's going to be according to everyone. But lamandam, according to the one that says that by arla, the reason why it's possible lafishim ein but din mammon, because you don't have any monetary value, because again arla is asabano, you can't, it doesn't even have a shava pruta for you, and therefore even if it would have a heter achila, it would be invalid because it doesn't have a monetary value to use it for other enjoyments, like Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim according to a mayor. So Hamani, so then you would have to say that the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbanan. He is like the Rabbanan, who they say Ma'aser Sheni is Mammon Hedjit, and not Rameir, because according to Rameir, actually an esrog of Ma'aser Sheni would be possible because it is Mammon Gavaya, and it wouldn't qualify as Lochem, according to that man, the Amma, who holds that the reason why Arla was possible is because it's not your money, it doesn't have a din Mammon, or Ma'aser Sheni Yerushalayim according to Rameir also doesn't have a din Mammon because it's Mammon Gavaya. I'm saying, but you can't use it for other hanas.
But if you're still allowed to eat it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That's the machlekes.
Unlike by Tumah, you're
right.
unable to eat it, so that's possible. But over here, you still can eat it.
So
let's say an esrog at Tumah chulin, it's kosher.
Right.
Over here, it's Ma'aser Sheni. If it's Tumah, it still could be eaten.
Right. So I'm saying that's the machlekes. If what's the criterion of eating, or if it's that of shaharnas, of other pleasures, that if it has a din mammon or not. So Ma'aser Sheni, if you hold like Rameir that holds that it's mammon gavaya, so it doesn't have a din mammon, it's not your money. You can't be mekadosh ish with it, but you could eat it. Yeah, it's not like truma, which one becomes tameh, then it has no, and it's an isser to eat it. So that would be the machlekes. If our Mishnah is like Rameir, if you hold it's because of het achila, but if you hold it because there's no din mammon, then our Mishnah would have to be like the Rabbanan. And because according to Rameir, Ma'aser Sheni Yerushalayim, if you hold, you need to have a din mammon, would not say you wouldn't be able to fulfill your obligation with it because doesn't have a din mammon. Next of the Mishnah we said was also chazazes. If let's say there are these like small little boils on the majority of the esrog, so it said then pasul it's going to be pasul. That disqualifies the esrog. Now, Amar Rav Chiz, he qualifies, and this is very similar to what we had in the previous sugya regarding when you have more berries than the hadas, than the myrtle branch. So he says, Davazed, this teaching I'm about to tell you, Rabbeinu HaGadol Amrai, our great teacher said this, and Amakam Yeh Be'ezrei, and Hashem should help him. Because he said, Lo Yishon, we didn't learn this in validation of Alsa Chazaz al Rubai. If it boils on the majority, it's going to be pasul, it's Ela B'makam Echad. Only if it was in one spot, then it's a problem. But if it's in 2-3 different places, kosher, it's going to be kosher. To which Amalei Rabbi says, to the contrary. If it's on the majority and it's b'shnayim b'shleish mekaymes 2-3 different places, then it's not only the problem of chazaz is not even beautiful. How about the kimenum, and then it's like speckled, which is really not nice, and the pasul is going to be invalid simply for being menumer, for being speckled. So Elorada says the Gemara, you're right. If we had this teaching as seif itmer, it wasn't said on the teaching of also chazaz al rubi pasul that it's only a problem in one spot, but 2-3 different places is going to be kosher. No, it's actually going on the inverse. Al miyutu kosher. We had the seif in the Mishnah said that if it's al miyute, if the chazazes, if these boils are only in the minority of the esrog, kosher, it's going to be kosher. On that, Rav Chizah saying what would be aser. Davazer ben Gal Amr, this our great teacher said, B'makam yiba azoy, and Hashem should help him. This that we said that's going to be kosher when it's in the minority is only if it's in one place. But if it's in 2-3 different places, and this we have in halacha, pasul. So then it's like speckled, and it's going to be pasul. That's what we say. So in this context, we're talking about chazazes, but most people are not looking at chazaz, they're looking at the black dots. So that's what we say that 2-3 different spots on the bottom is going to be a problem. So even though if you have it in one spot, let's say al miyuta in one area, it's going to be kosher. But if it's in 2-3 different places, which is what's 2-3 different places is if like you have to turn the esrog and you see it in 2-3 different spots, then it's going to be a problem. Now, Amar Rava says a very important halacha. Again, in this context, we're talking about chazaz, it's boils, but again, most of us are not looking at chazaz, we're looking at the black dots, which is also a problem. So Amar Rava says, V'al. Now, there's a machlekes Rishonim, but again, we always go with Rashi. Chaytmei literally means to say the nose, but it's the the thickness of the height, which from that point on it starts to slope and go towards the top, there even a minute amount, which again in this context we're talking about chazazas, nami pasal is also going to be pasal. Why? Why is the chaitim? Why is that more stringent? Because that's where it's the most visible to the eyes more than any other place, and because that's where a person looks at. You look at the esrog, the vision takes on the area of the slope, and therefore again that's what we know that is the more chamer the area. If you have a black dot here on the top, then people are going to say not to use it. Now another important halacha that used to be way more common, and I have all the tzaddikim stories with this part of the esrog. The Mishnah said nitla pit masai. If the pitim, which is the little woody type substance that's on the top of the esrog, if that's taken off, so that's going to be possible. Now, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, he says that in his Mishnah, when he would teach this halacha of nitla pit masai, it actually said nitla buchnasai. Now, buchna, it actually means the pestle. Pestle is that tool that was used. If you look at this pitim, so it's very similar to what they would use to crush the spices in the mortar. That's called a pestle. So when they said there's a halacha in his Mishnah about nitla pit masai, they called it nitla buchnasai. Why? So Rashi has two interpretations. From his elder teacher Rabbi Yaakov, he says because it's pointy and it's made like a pestle. That's why they called pit masai buchnasai. It's pestle. Now again, if only the shashanta, which is that round piece on top of the pitim that was removed, that's going to be kosher. But we're talking about that the whole thing comes out, and actually that goes to the other interpretation Rashi brings from Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi, that he says that the pitim and the ukitz were both by the tail, meaning the ukitz is when the wood is taken out from what's beyond the pit of meaning there's like a hole in the esrog. So what's taken out from the hole, what's beyond the hole is going to be kosher, but the pitim is that's taken out from within the esrog, and therefore that's considered a problem about chaser of missing, and therefore it's going to be possible. And that's why Yitzchak bar Elazar says nitla buchnasa. What's the chiddush? It's saying it's taking the pestle, meaning what goes inside the esrog, like the pestle that goes inside and smashes the spices in the mortar. That's what we mean nitla pit masai. So that's why he's actually differentiating. Pit masai when it's taken is when it's inside, and you'll see in halacha also it's the same thing when it cracks regarding the other days of the sukkah. So, but if it's from inside, that's mochamer because that's chaser, that's from the thing itself, whereas what's outside is that's not going to be a problem. But Rashi says he likes Rabbi Yaakov, the first interpretation, better. He says because you don't find pitim and ukitz in the same place, and we generally call the pitim the top one and the ukitz as the one on the bottom. If the ukitz is actually removed, then we say it's kosher, and pitim we say that's going to be pasul. Again, he wanted to say that it's actually in the same thing. It's that the ukitz is what's sticking out beyond, and the pitim is what's sticking out inside. So it has a whole discussion to show that we do show in the same place. But upon him, that's the halacha that we know if the pitim falls off, that it's going to be possible again. That doesn't mean the shashanta, it means the whole stick, which again, there's discussion exactly what part is considered what. Is it what's specifically inside the esrog, or even just the stick itself? That's going to be possible. Another halacha the Mishnah said is niklaf. If let's say the esrog is peeled, so that's going to be possible. Now, related to this teaching, Omar Rava says, "Hi esrog de iglit." Regarding this esrog that's peeled, kahina sumka, like a red date. Here also, after you peel the esrog, it turns red. Like Rashi says, all fruits that are peeled, they turn red. That's ksher, it's going to be kosher. Says the Gemara, how could you say, "V'anantam we learn nikla pasul"? A peeled esrog is going to be pasul. How could you peel the whole esrog and say it's going to be kosher? Says the Gemara, like kash not difficult. As we continue time of lamed vav med aleph, ha bekula ha b'mektsasa, which actually machlek is Rashi and Rebbeinu Chananel, which Tosfos brings. Rashi says, if you peel the whole esrog, it's going to be kosher. Because it's all one uniform color of red. Ha b'mektsasa, if you peel only part of the esrog, it's going to be pasul, because that's menumar. That's speckled, and it doesn't look nice. It has these different colors. It's discoloration. Rebbeinu Chananel says the opposite. As we'll see on the next daf, the Gemara is going to have an interesting discussion regarding comparing the invalidations of an esrog to that of treifa, to that of a mortal defect of an animal. And the Gemara is going to compare for the treifa of peeled, which when you peel the animal, it's only going to be the whole thing that's peeled that makes it into a treifa. But if you only peel some of it, it's not going to be a treifa. So therefore, it would seem to be the opposite, like Rabbi Chananel says, that niklaf kula is going to be the invalidation, because then it's like whether animal is a treifa is the same problem that we have by an esrog, whereas you only peel some of it, that's not a treifa, and therefore that wouldn't be a problem by that of esrog. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.